So your ex is already with someone new. And you're sitting there, staring at their latest post, double-checking their profile, reading between every line of every caption, wondering how the hell they moved on so fast. Like you were just a pit stop. Like everything you built was disposable. Like you never even existed. Let me stop you right there. They didn't move on. They escaped. But not from you, from intimacy, from accountability, from reality. They weren't running from your flaws. They were running from their own reflection in the mirror you held up for them. And now, while you're here trying to process, understand, grieve, and rebuild, they're out there parading a new connection that looks like a fairy tale, but smells like recycled trauma dressed in a new outfit. You're not crazy for feeling betrayed. You're not weak for feeling stuck. You're human, processing something most people are too scared to admit. That being replaced fast doesn't just hurt your heart. It punches your ego in the throat. You gave your time, you gave your effort. You gave parts of yourself you don't hand out easily. And now someone else is getting their attention like it costs nothing. But let's make something very clear before we go any further. They didn't replace you because you weren't enough. They replaced you because they were never ready to face what being with you exposed inside them. Your presence confronted their avoidance. Your love required responsibility. Your emotional depth demanded that they actually show up. And they weren't built for that. And rather than rise to meet you there, they bailed. Quick, quiet, cowardly. Let me ask you something raw. Would you rather be abandoned by someone fake, or held hostage in a relationship where the other person is emotionally absent? Because that's what you were dealing with. Someone who smiles big but feels shallow. Someone who performs connection but avoids vulnerability like the plague. Here's the brutal truth. Most avoidant people don't fall in love. They fall into comfort zones that protect their ego. You were a threat to that. Not because you were too needy, not because you were too intense, but because you were real. You saw them, you challenged them. You pulled out something raw, something unfiltered, something true, and they didn't know what the hell to do with that. So what do emotionally unavailable people do when they feel emotionally exposed? They eject. They don't communicate. They don't self-reflect. They just cut and run. And the fastest way to outrun guilt? Find someone new. Quickly. Publicly. Loudly. Because if they can convince themselves, and everyone watching, that they're thriving, that they're happier, that they've moved on, then they never have to sit with the discomfort of what they did, or what they never dealt with. But here's what they're not telling you, and maybe not even telling themselves. The faster someone moves on, the less they've healed. Real healing isn't loud. It isn't cute. It's ugly. It's quiet. It's months of reflection and discomfort and discipline and accountability. But your ex skipped all that. Why? Because being alone means facing themselves. And that's the one person they've never been honest with. So, don't you dare sit there and internalize their emotional immaturity as your inadequacy. Don't confuse their speed with strength. Avoidants move fast because they need a new distraction before the old one fully catches up. And what you're calling replaced is really just recycled. Same wounds, different face, same ending, guaranteed. You think they found someone better? No. They've found someone easier to hide inside. But eventually, every mask slips, every fantasy breaks, every emotionally stunted person hits the same wall. Because you can't keep running from yourself forever. Marcus Aurelius said it best. Nowhere you can go can save you from yourself. They'll learn that the hard way. And when they do, they'll remember you. Not as the one who broke them, but as the one who tried to love them after they already abandoned themselves. So, let me remind you of something else. You are not a failure. You are not someone who got left behind. You are someone who showed up with real love for someone who only knew how to hide. And that doesn't make you less. It makes you dangerous. Because once you heal from this, you become the kind of person who never gets manipulated by emotional runners again. And trust me, they'll notice that glow up before anyone else does. Stay with me. Because in this video, we're going deeper. We're exposing every psychological reason avoidants move on fast. Why it's not a compliment to their healing, and how to break the cycle so you don't fall for the same type again. But first, do something bold. Comment "I outgrew the illusion" below if you're ready to stop internalizing their avoidance and start reclaiming your clarity. Then hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's still doubting their worth after getting replaced. Join our channel membership to help us keep speaking the truths most people are too afraid to say. Because this is not the end. It's the start of something dangerous. And that danger is you, fully awake. Let's dive in. Key point 1. They didn't replace you. They regulated themselves. Let's kill the fantasy right now. They didn't choose someone better. They chose someone easier to control their emotional state. That's it. That's the uncomfortable truth. Most avoidant types don't move on the way secure people do. They regulate, and they do it in the most impulsive way possible, by attaching themselves to a new person who makes them feel temporarily safe from their own emotional chaos. They weren't chasing love. They were chasing stability through escapism. See, you required presence. You wanted communication. You asked questions. You noticed patterns. You wanted a relationship that grew, not one that repeated the same dead loops. That's not attractive to someone avoidant. It's terrifying. Because people who are emotionally unavailable crave connection. But the moment it feels real, they see it as a threat to their independence and identity. So, what do? They replace intimacy with proximity. They replace connection with novelty. They replace reflection with projection, telling themselves you were too much, you were the problem, you didn't make them feel safe. But let's be honest. The only person who's never felt safe to them is themselves. You didn't scare them. The mirror you held up did. And when they looked into that mirror, they didn't see love. They saw inadequacy. They saw a version of themselves they didn't want to deal with. So instead of growing, they ran. And who did they run to? Someone new. Someone easier. Someone who doesn't challenge their emotional shallowness. Not because that new person is better, but because they're convenient. That's what most avoidant rebounds are, a quick fix for emotional discomfort, a temporary salve, a placebo love that buys them just enough time to avoid doing the real inner work. And if you're sitting there wondering, why didn't I deserve a second chance? The answer is, you didn't get a second chance because you made them feel too seen the first time. The new person doesn't challenge them, you did. And that's why they replaced you. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared just enough to be terrified by it. Let that land. Key point 2. The faster they moved on, the more they're avoiding themselves. Let's talk timing. You know what hurts the most? Not just that they moved on, but how damn fast they did it. Like clockwork. Like they had someone waiting in the wings. Like your breakup was just an inconvenience, not an emotional event. And while you were crying, spiraling, or just trying to breathe without checking your phone every 10 minutes, they were already posting photos, cuddled up with someone new. Now here's what your mind does in that moment. You make their speed mean your failure. Was I that easy to forget? Did I mean anything at all? Was I the placeholder the whole time? Stop. Right there. Because speed doesn't equal strength. Speed equals escape. Psychologically, when someone rebounds quickly after a breakup, especially avoidant types, they're not healing. They're avoiding the emotional crash. They don't process the breakup. They bypass it. Because facing the end of a relationship means they'd have to face all the parts of themselves they've been suppressing for years. They'd have to confront the emotional numbness, the fear of abandonment they pretend not to have, the guilt, the shame, the reasons they couldn't show up fully when it mattered. That's terrifying to someone who's emotionally unavailable. So, what's the next best thing? Find someone new, fast, attractive, available, and most importantly, distracting. Because nothing says, I don't have to feel anything, like infatuation with someone new. And let's be clear, that's not love, that's not healing, that's emotional anesthesia. A quick fix to mute the emotional hangover that would come if they ever slowed down long enough to look inward. They didn't move on quickly because they're strong. They moved on quickly because stillness feels like suffocation to someone who's emotionally underdeveloped. And the truth is, your silence, your absence, your growth, it terrifies them because deep down, they know you're doing the work they're still running from. Let me be blunt. The faster someone moves on, the harder it's going to hit them when the newness wears off. And they realize nothing has actually changed. Same wounds, same patterns, same empty feeling, just in a different bed. A key point 3. They had to devalue you to justify replacing you. Let's go deeper, because now it's getting dark. They didn't just replace you, they rewrote the entire story in their head to justify why they had to. And that part? That's what really screws with your head. Suddenly, everything you shared feels twisted. The good memories, forgotten. The sacrifices, ignored. Your love, your loyalty, your effort, all minimized, downplayed, erased. Why? Because in order to make themselves feel okay with moving on so fast, they had to make you the villain of the story. Not because you were, but because they needed a narrative that allowed them to run guilt-free. It's emotional self-preservation, avoidant style. And you felt it, didn't you? That coldness toward the end. That subtle shift. That sudden, you're too much energy. They started picking at you, criticizing things they used to admire, acting like your emotional needs were unreasonable. Like you were the reason things got heavy, not their lack of depth, not their refusal to open up, not their constant hot and cold confusion. You became the scapegoat, because it's easier to demonize someone than admit you were never ready to love them properly. Let me say it bluntly, they didn't outgrow you. They dismantled the pedestal they once put you on, so they wouldn't have to feel like they were leaving someone valuable behind. That new person they're with now, they're walking into a version of your ex who's wearing a mask. A mask that says, "Look at me, I'm better now. I'm more emotionally available. I've changed." But here's the truth. No one transforms that fast, not without hitting rock bottom, not without doing the work, not without sitting in the emotional wreckage and owning it, which, spoiler alert, your ex didn't do. They just slapped on a new connection and pretended the old one was never real, to protect their ego. So if you're feeling confused, disrespected, or even gaslit right now, you're not imagining it. You're feeling the effects of someone rewriting the truth to avoid facing their own failure. And that's not on you. That's on them. You were real. They were rehearsing. And the moment it stopped being a performance they could control, they tore down the stage and pretended the play never happened. Your key point 4. The replacement isn't real. It's just a role being recast. Let's pull the curtain all the way back. That new person your ex is with. The one who seems to have everything you didn't. The one they're suddenly doing all the things you begged them to do. Trips, texts, public affection, emotional effort. Yeah. That's not growth. That's performance. It's not a new love story. It's the same script, just recast with a new actor, because avoidant types don't grow by default. They don't wake up one day emotionally intelligent just because they found someone new. They mirror what they think love is supposed to look like, until it starts feeling real again, and then they do what they always do. Pull back, shut down, sabotage. So, don't look at their rebound and think you've been replaced by someone better. You've been replaced by someone more manageable. Someone who doesn't know their patterns yet. Someone who hasn't hit the conflict stage. Someone who's still in the honeymoon phase of deception. But let me ask you this. If your ex has really changed, why did they never do the work with you? Why did their growth only start after they walked away from someone who loved them deeply? I'll tell you why. Because it's not growth. It's emotional cosplay. They're mimicking emotional maturity because they want to look like the good guy or girl in this story. Because they want to feel like they evolved without actually confronting the wreckage they left behind. But what they don't realize is this. You can't run from the version of yourself that keeps ruining connections. You can't post your way out of patterns. You can't rebrand your trauma and call it clarity. Eventually, the new person will hit the same wall, the cracks will show, and your ex will face the one truth they can't avoid forever. It wasn't the partner. It was the pattern. Now, I want you to pause for a moment. Take a breath. And drop this in the comments right now. I am not hard to love. I was just asking for more than survival mode. Let that be your mantra, your declaration, your psychological boundary. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for exactly what love requires: emotional safety, effort, reciprocity, presence. But to someone still trapped in avoidance and fear, that request sounds like a threat. So they chose someone who demands less, who scratches the surface and doesn't dive into the depth, who gives them the illusion of control without the challenge of self-awareness. But don't confuse the quietness of their new relationship with peace. It's not peaceful. It's emotionally shallow. You weren't replaced. You were too real to replicate. Key point 5. Your emotional depth was never the problem. It was the mirror. Let's get one thing straight. You weren't too much. You were just too real for someone who lives behind emotional walls. You weren't dramatic. You weren't needy. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for presence, consistency, emotional honesty, mutual effort. And for someone avoidant, that's not love. That's pressure. That's exposure. That's a mirror reflecting all the things they've spent years trying to avoid. That mirror? That was you. Because when someone is emotionally unavailable, what they fear most isn't rejection. It's being truly seen, and you saw them. You saw their shutdowns. You saw the patterns. You saw the contradictions. You didn't buy the performance. You didn't accept the half-truths. You didn't settle for crumbs and call it connection. And that scared the hell out of them, because your emotional depth demanded accountability. And people who aren't ready to confront themselves will always choose comfort over connection. Let me give it to you straight. They didn't leave you because you were too intense. They left because they weren't built for real intimacy. They weren't ready for a relationship that required vulnerability. They weren't ready to be consistent, present, and emotionally available. And instead of rising to your level, they bailed and found someone who wouldn't challenge their emotional limitations. But here's the kicker. That emotional depth they ran from. It's the exact thing they'll start craving when the shallow waters of their rebound start to dry up. Because surface-level love only lasts as long as the novelty does. And once that fades, they'll remember you. Not because they miss the comfort, but because they'll finally realize, that person didn't make me feel small. They were just too emotionally expansive for the small version of me I refuse to outgrow. And when that hits, it won't be pretty. It won't be healing. It'll be regret masked as nostalgia. A longing they won't even know how to name. Because they let go of the one person who actually saw them. So if you've been wondering, was I too sensitive? Too intense? Too emotional? No. You were just awake in a relationship with someone who was emotionally asleep. And their decision to leave had less to do with your depth, and everything to do with how unprepared they were to meet you there. Key point 6. No, they haven't changed. They've just switched masks. Let's talk about the lie that keeps you up at night. That awful little voice whispering, they're treating the new person better. They've changed. Maybe they just needed someone else to be a better version of themselves. Stop right there. That's not transformation. That's emotional theater. And you're watching the highlight reel of an act they've been perfecting their whole life. They haven't changed. They've just switched masks. Because real change, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen between hookups. It doesn't happen while avoiding accountability, ghosting conversations, or blaming everyone else for their emotional failures. Let me say it loud. Avoidants don't evolve under pressure. They adapt to escape responsibility. So when you see them doing the things you begged for, posting affection, making time, acting present, you think, why not me? Here's why. Because now they know what you wanted, and they're using that knowledge as a performance blueprint. Not because they've grown, but because they want to prove to you, to themselves, and to their new person that they're not the problem. It's image control. It's reputation rehab. It's a carefully curated PR campaign in the form of a new relationship. But the core hasn't changed, because the core requires work, and work requires solitude, reflection, honesty, accountability. Not distractions, not rebounds, not aesthetic Instagram love. Here's the truth they won't admit. They're not doing better, they're just performing better. And eventually, that mask slips, Because you can't maintain a lie and call it love. You can't perform emotional security forever when you never built it in the first place. You know how you know they haven't changed. Because real growth would have started with an apology. Real growth would have shown up in silence, not in status updates. Real growth takes responsibility, and they skipped that chapter. So don't fall for the rebrand. Don't measure your worth against someone else's performance. Because nothing you're seeing right now is rooted in real healing. It's just a prettier version of the same avoidance in a fresh outfit. And when the act collapses, when the illusion breaks, they'll remember you. Not because they love you, but because you were the only one who didn't fall for their mask. You loved what was behind it. And that's the kind of love they'll spend years chasing but never find again. Because it required a version of themselves they weren't brave enough to become. Key point 7. Your silence is louder than their performance. Let's flip the script. You've been sitting in silence. Maybe not posting, maybe not texting, maybe not reacting at all, and you're wondering if they even notice, if they even care, if your absence means anything while they're out parading their new connection. Let me hit you with a truth most people don't want to admit. Your silence is echoing louder than anything they're posting. Because here's what avoidants expect after a breakup, especially after they replace you fast. A reaction, a meltdown, an attempt to win them back, proof that they still have emotional control over you. But when that doesn't happen, when you go quiet, still, unavailable, you shatter their illusion of power. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means discipline. It means healing. It means you're no longer playing a rigged emotional game. And that terrifies them. Not because they miss you yet, but because your silence forces them to face the one thing they avoid at all costs. Themselves. Every time they check your profile and see no drama, no desperate quotes, no reactive behavior, that eats at them. Because it means you're not orbiting around their chaos anymore. You're not sitting in emotional purgatory waiting for breadcrumbs. You've moved into presence, into clarity, into the most dangerous thing of all, self-respect. Here's what you need to understand. People like your ex are addicted to control, not connection. They feed on emotional responses. So when you go still, you starve their ego. And guess what? That new person they're with, eventually they'll start noticing that your ex is still curious about your silence. Still peeking, still wondering, still haunted. Because while they were trying to move fast and look strong, you were doing the actual work. No chaos, no noise, no theatrics, just evolution in real time. That's what makes you dangerous now. Not because you're loud, but because you've become unavailable to their dysfunction. Your silence? That's not distance, that's dominance. In the quietest, most mature form possible. So if you've been thinking your stillness makes you look like you don't care, let me correct that. Your stillness says, I care about myself more than I care about proving anything to you. And that's the final power move. This was never about being replaced. It was about remembering who you are. Let's land the plane. By now you know the truth. They didn't replace you. They ran from the version of you that required their growth. They switched partners not because you lacked something, but because they couldn't face what you brought to the surface. This wasn't about love. It was about avoidance, about hiding in something new so they wouldn't have to own what they did in the old. But now, it's not about them anymore. This is about you. The you that stayed solid while they played games. The you that didn't break when they left like a coward. The you that's been sitting in silence, reflecting, leveling up, while they run from one shallow comfort to another. You're not hard to love. You're not replaceable. You're not broken. You're becoming. You're healing. And you're stepping into a version of yourself they were never qualified to hold. So the next time that creeping doubt slips into your mind, the next time you catch yourself checking their page, comparing, questioning, pause and remember, they didn't move on. They bailed. They didn't grow. They fled. They didn't replace you. They ran from the real you because they were too small to stay in the same room with your emotional power. This is the season where you stop chasing closure and start becoming untouchable. You're not behind. You're ahead. Because healing in silence will always outlast performing in denial. Now it's your turn to speak. Drop this in the comments right now and claim it. I am not replaceable. I am the reset, not for them, for you. And if this message cracked something open in you, if you felt seen, called out, empowered, smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who's still haunted by the lie of being replaced. Join our channel membership to help us keep speaking these truths loud, raw, and real. Let's build a community that stops begging for love and starts becoming the kind of people who never settle for anything less than emotional sovereignty. This isn't the end of your story. This is where you stop chasing people and start choosing yourself. We're not done. We're just getting started. Let's evolve together.